This shocking twist in the double homicide of an Ohio dentist and his wife that happened just before New Year's. A suspect now charged and arrested, and we are learning he was previously married to one of the victims. Michael McKee is now facing 2 counts of murder in connection with the deaths of Spencer and Monique Tepe. Now, he is Monique's ex-husband. The couple was found fatally shot in their Ohio home while their 2 children and the dog were unharmed inside. Police were able to zero in on him as a suspect because of surveillance video in the neighborhood around the time the couple was murdered. Now, from those videos, they tracked McKee's vehicle, finding it in Rockford, Illinois. McKee is expected to appear in court in Illinois tomorrow, Monday. A new development tonight, a community coming together to honor Spencer and Monique for their funeral that took place today. And for more, we are joined by Jennifer Coffendorfer tonight, law and justice contributor for NewsNation and former special agent with the FBI. Jennifer, thanks for joining us on this case.
Thanks for having me.
And one of the details early on in this investigation, both the children were found physically unharmed inside of the house. No signs of forced entry at that home. What does that information immediately indicate about the person who did this?
Well, it indicated certainly that they knew this couple well, that they had staked out the location well. It was also very clear they knew where the camera locations were because they evaded a lot of camera coverage, it would seem. And so somehow he came across that entry code to enter the residence.
McKee himself, a vascular surgeon in Illinois and California, according to the Columbus Dispatch. His medical license record showing no disciplinary history or no malpractice there. And then his criminal records only showing traffic-related tickets in the past. He has been charged. He has not been convicted. Are you surprised by the previous profile of this suspect?
Not really. When I look at this case, we knew it was going to be very personal for somebody to go up in the bedroom and kill these individuals with a gun. So we knew it was very personal, somebody who knew them. What is interesting, though, this divorce happened about 9 years ago. They were married for such a brief time, only 7 months. And so that is strange, but I think it was a deep-seated resentment and hate that just built up and finally came to this conclusion.
And we know the murders happened just before the couple was about to celebrate an anniversary. I mean, is there anything to that timing that is significant or jumping out to you?
I think it could be. You know, when I look back at the Brown University shootings, Natasha, remember that individual, now that we have his sort of manifesto of why he did it, he had a deep-seated resentment that stayed with him for 3 years. I think that this could be a situation that's very similar, that it just built up over time and finally came to a head. And probably that anniversary could have been part of the reason.
Talk to me more about how this suspect was identified and found, because you say he did seem to have some knowledge of surveillance cameras and trying to evade them, but he was ultimately found, interestingly, through surveillance footage in that neighborhood that police used. They saw him entering around the time before this was suspected to happen and then leaving afterwards, and then they used all of this to track his vehicle during a 10-day manhunt. Walk us through what that investigation looks like.
Right, exactly, Natasha. He couldn't evade all the cameras. There were just too many ring cameras and street cameras. And that footage from that alley between 2 and 5 a.m. was critical for law enforcement. Once they had him on camera, they could continue following that path that he took, which ultimately led to the vehicle he entered. That vehicle he entered then was registered to him. It was his vehicle, and they found him in Illinois. So great police work in tracking through that video surveillance.
And obviously, this case so tragic, and one thinks about these 2 young children, the dog in the house. Is there anything that we should be taking away from a case like this?
I think the one thing is if there is a domestic situation that just keeps on lingering, and I would believe it's going to come out that some people knew about maybe some issues, maybe a recontract, maybe had some concern, that they really have to take these things seriously. This individual was obviously, if it ends up being him, very disturbed.
Yeah, and tell me more about that, Jennifer. If someone like the wife here, Monique, were to have reached out to you before this happened and say, I'm concerned, I have an ex, he's not letting us be, what would you tell them to do?
Well, First of all, I would say obviously get rid of all contact, block everything, don't let them communicate. Secondarily, I would say get rid of those punch pad entry codes. Too many people likely had that. They had their wedding there. You need deadbolts, you need locks on your doors that are secure, that no one knows except for your family. Those were the two major things that I think might have led to this.
Jennifer Koffendorfer, appreciate the analysis as always. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Natasha.
Can't wait to get to my next guest on this, because Matt Murphy's a former homicide prosecutor and author of The Book of Murder, A Prosecutor's Journey Through Love and Death. Matt, thanks so much for coming on. You know, the footprints outside the house, it bothers me so much because it was snowy in Columbus. And that would have been something that they could actually see, track, and then match to footwear if they could find it in, you know, Dr. McKee's home in Chicago.
Ideally, you're right. But you know what, Ashley, there's always mistakes made in cases like this. And every murder case is like a collage of evidence. It's the accumulated weight of everything that they have. And snow is tricky. In Southern California, as you can imagine, we don't get too many of those. I actually learned in a Bigfoot documentary, believe it or not, snow is tricky because when it freezes and melts in consecutive cycles, they tend to grow. And you can imagine what a defense lawyer could do with that. Blood is better. I have done those. I've done socked impressions where somebody's wearing socks and they step in blood. But remember, this is going to be an accumulation. So right now, there's some FBI agent, literally as we speak, pouring through this guy's computer records, cell phone records. They're looking at cell phone towers. Given the distance that he drove, he had to stop for gas, assuming, you know, he's presumed innocent, but assuming they got it right. So there's an avalanche of evidence coming that we have not heard yet.
So,
and of course, you're right.
I'm going to talk about that, Matt. In just a second, I'm going to talk to, like, in the next block, I'm literally going to run through all this digital and electronic evidence. But I'm still kind of stuck on the footprints, not maybe just outside, but also inside the house, because there could have been shoe impressions made inside the house as well, maybe on the carpet, maybe in blood, but it's compromised by the people who got there because the police didn't. So I was worried about that. But I'm also thinking about shoe treads. I have seen murder cases where a shoe tread is actually looked at for what's stuck inside the tread. Material from the crime scene. They might have had special gravel put on their back, you know, patio area that suddenly would show up in Chicago if that's the case. You know, are these the kinds of details that police are going after right now, like literally going down to the granular?
Oh, you bet they are. So any shoes that he's got are, I guarantee they're already in police custody. And they're going to be looked at by forensics. And what they're going to look for is what's called GSR, or gunshot residue. Another thing to remember is when somebody has a firearm, he's got quite a jawline, doesn't he, this guy? When somebody has a firearm, it's not like TV where it's just a gun. Guns come along with gun boxes and cleaning equipment and ammunition. And what's really interesting, Ashley, is there is a system known as NIBIN. And that's the National Ballistics database, where they take shell casings, assuming it's a semi-automatic handgun. We don't know that yet. But the shell casings that get expended on those, they're like DNA for firearms. And as DNA got all the glory, it's been like the rock star of forensic science. Very quietly, there's been huge forensic advancements in ballistic technology where they microscopically can match the grooves. We just had that in the Ashley Buzzard case in California. The tiny little microscopic grooves from the expended empty shell casing that gets ejected from the gun. And that is incredibly persuasive in front of a jury, having done those murder cases before. So it's going to be an accumulation of evidence here, and I can't wait to see what they got.
I just wanted to get your first reaction to hearing that this neighbor of yours, who you'd spoken with and thought was delightful, has been arrested on 2 aggravated murders.
Yeah, it's really was a shock to the building and everything, because I met him really once. We really talked at the poolside, and that was during the summer, shortly after he moved in. And we talked at the pool, and he was very friendly. We were all barbecuing at that time, and he did not seem like somebody that would be doing something like this. But like Ashley, like you point out, you don't know what is in a person's mind, what they're obsessing about, and what they're going through in their mind, and what causes them to react like this. but I would see him and we would pass each other. I saw him last week, too, going by. And, you know, we would just say, hi, how are you? Hi. And that's it. We never really spoke after that. He was kind of a quiet person to himself. But, you know, it is shocking that a resident of this building was charged with such a terrible crime. And residents
I can't
are
imagine.
concerned.
Can I ask you, how did you all even find out? Like, how did the news sort of spread through the building?
Well, I found out because there was Channel 7 crew that was outside there of our building trying to talk to residents. And I walked up to them because I used to work at Channel 7 in Chicago. I was the assignment editor. And I said, what's happening over here? What's going on? The doorman says you wanted to talk with me. And they told me about what was happening. And when they said Michael McKee, I said, well, I don't know if I know him. Show me a picture. And then they showed me the picture. And I went, oh my gosh, I know him. He's one of my neighbors. He lives two stories above me in the building here. And I said, why? My goodness, it was unbelievable that this man who was he was just so nice when I talked to him. And then, as I said, we would pass each other. This is a building of a lot of professional people, okay? And people that come in.
Speaking of that, I want to let, sorry to interrupt, Geraldine, sorry to interrupt, but I want to let our viewers know that when you say it's a building of professional people, that includes you. Not only did you work at Channel 7 as an assignment editor, you're also a true crime author. So tell the audience what you did to take a peek 2 floors up where he lived and what you saw.
Well, I went upstairs and I saw a police officer sitting right in front of his door, guarding his place there. And I took a little video. I guess it's the newswoman in me. And I also took a picture of what his apartment looked like from the outside. And I just was surprised that there's a police officer on duty there 24 hours. And then I came up the next day, and there, Lord and behold, I saw that there were now investigators there. And I went to get my car in the garage, and there was an investigation van saying Crime Lab from Columbus. So that is something else that I videotaped right away. And the investigators going to the van. And when I went upstairs, I saw that they were taking boxes of stuff out of there and putting it in there. They had one box and they were putting stuff in there. You know what? It's a very circumstantial evidence thing. You have the digital stuff and so on, but you don't have the firing gun. You know what I mean? That's something that they're looking for. And I'm sure that they're also looking for any messages he had or drawings and things like that.
We're about to do a deep dive with investigators who do this for a living, who are going to run down the list of everything they probably looked for in that apartment and seized, as well as other places as well. But I'd like to just ask you in retrospect, you know, we all look back at things and people when we learn something that's jarring, and then we think, okay, now in retrospect, it's unusual. Was there anything about Dr. Michael McKee that was the least bit unusual or struck you as unusual in retrospect?
No, nothing struck me as being unusual. He was a business person coming in. We'd pass in the hallway. We'd be in the elevator, and I'd say hi, and he'd say hi. We were all tired from working and everything like that. But, you know, the building put out a memo to all the residents. And this is a memo, and it says, good afternoon, residents. Due to an active police investigation involving a resident, you may see and encounter law enforcement officials in and around the building over the next few days. Now, that is what alarmed a lot of residents.
Bring in Laura Petler, a forensic criminologist who's been writing about this very case. Laura, thank you so much for being on. I really appreciate this. Look, I spoke with the Tepe's brother-in-law a week ago, and you know, it seemed as though there was no one on the radar for the family members as to who could have done something this awful. But now he's saying that there were these red flags, that Dr. McKee had threatened Monique Tepe's life when she was Monique McKee. And I just wonder, how red a flag is it when someone makes a death threat to the person they're married to?
Hi, Ashley. Thank you so much for having me. Yes, so absolutely, the death threats in an intimate partner relationship are basically a huge warning sign, and it's always best to view them in context of it's shifting, like the conflict between them is shifting between emotional conflict to potentially a behavioral conflict where maybe an abuser is going to then move from just thinking about hurting the victim to actually acting, and that becomes lethal for a domestic violence homicide victim.
I mean, I suspect if there's going to be a trial, I mean, that's, you know, obviously there can always be a plea bargain, as we saw in Koberger, but if there's going to be a trial, I sense that a lot of this stuff is going to come out in court, the things that were said, the things that were threatened, et cetera, and they matter to juries. But I was really taken by that wedding video, not just the words when she said wrong relationships and waterfalls of tears led me to you, Spencer, but she started to cry and continued to cry all the way through that. And I just wanted to get your professional assessment of that.
Yes, you know, that struck me as well. And it struck me that the words that she chose, you know, she said, you know, bad bumble dates, wrong relationships. And she put the S on the end of it, Ashley. And I thought that was interesting where she said a wrong relationships. But, you know, did she mean a wrong relationship? And that's one of the things I've been thinking about recently. In addition to that, then she said, the last part of it was about the waterfall of tears. And so for me, it kind of the summarizing statement that kind of went through my mind was that she went on a journey, and there was a tremendous amount of emotional growth through trial and error. And that resulted in meaning to her, because she was saying, you know, this wasn't worthless. This wasn't, my journey mattered because it led me all the way to you. And it really struck me that she was so emotional and she was so grateful to be there with Spencer that day. That's how I perceived it.
One of the things that you wrote about the Tepe murders, Dr. Petler, is, quote, murder is conflict resolution for the offender. And I just want you to pull on that thread a bit.
Sure. That is something I've been talking about for a very, very long time throughout my career, simply because this is the type of situation that I specialize in. So in domestic violence homicide, and the reason I'm using that analogy and those words is because the defendant in this case is the former intimate partner of Monique Tepe. And so it's possible that, of course, there's going to be a trial, but what they're saying is that they're alleging this person is responsible for their deaths, Monique and Spencer. And what I mean by conflict resolution is that murder is conflict resolution in that it resolves an internal conflict that's going on inside the offender. And this is just a blanket statement across the board for intimate partner homicide. And it doesn't make sense, but to us maybe, but it makes sense to that person, the offender, him or herself. And so sometimes it can be years like this, and in these cases there is stalking, and of course all of these other lethality factors that go in, that we're looking at those variables when we have a situation like this. And as this case evolves, I think all of that will come to fruition for everyone so that they can see kind of what happened. But sometimes these types of cases, offenders keep things close to the vest and they never reveal why they might have done something to injure or kill victims, because that's how they maintain control, and that's how they continue to relive that emotional, cathartic execution over and over and over again.
Next guest, Phil Waters. He's a retired homicide detective with a lot more cases under his belt than me, 400 of them at the Houston Police Department. Phil, it's good to have you back on the show. Thank you so much for doing this. So is it your expertise, my friend, that criminals simply seem to think they're invisible while driving in the dark?
Well, it's good to be back with you, Ash. It's been a while. Happy New Year. Yeah, there's always that feeling that running around under a cover of darkness, where darkness is the absence of light. And so that gives them a form of security that can't be found anywhere else. And especially in an event like this, traveling at night, he may have traveled, actually, may have traveled during the day. We don't know yet. Waited around, did his recon, and then he went and did what he did. And then he travels back at night. So it is a comfort to guys like this that they think they are invisible on the road.
Well, listen, again, I keep repeating it, innocent until proven guilty, but look at these routes. I want you to weigh in on the importance of routes taken and routes avoided, meaning if a longer route was taken to avoid tolls, that speaks volumes to a homicide detective, doesn't it?
Well, all of these movements are going to mean something. They're going to tell part of the story. So what was interesting to me, what will be, is if they determine, and I'm sure they will, what was the route that he took going, and did that change in the route coming back? And is there some sort of plan that he had that this was going to, he thought he was throwing people off? But, they're going to pull data, I would think, out of the car. If he had his cell phone with him, data out of there that's going to track him one way or the other. So it will be interesting to see if he tried to alter the routes to kind of throw off his trail a little bit, so to speak.
I've done a few crimes where there have been long drives. And again, he's innocent until proven guilty. But if Dr. McKee did this, is it possible that he and his, I'm guessing, very expensive defense attorney, because he's a vascular surgeon and he's going to hire one, is it possible they could use the excuse, yes, I drove that route. I needed to talk to her, and that's all I planned to do, to get them off the death penalty and premeditated murder?
Well, that's a good question, and I've been pondering what their approach is going to be for his defense. So they can I guess proffer that, they can say that kind of thing, but this is a case like all homicides where you let the evidence lead you where you need to be, and it's always a journey for the truth. They can have their opinions about what he did, and they can tell the story, but they can't have their own set of facts. And these kind of facts that I think that are going to be developed in the digital footprint that he made on this journey are going to be pretty hard to dispute. And I don't think that some weak argument about, hey, I was just going up there to have a chat and it just turned bad, that's not going to mean there's not a lot of depth.
Well, especially if they find a murder weapon, which we don't know if they've done that. But if they find a murder weapon, it's like you don't go for a chat and take ballistics with you. So that could wipe that off the map right there. I only have 30 seconds left, but I got to ask you, because you know about what happens to someone after he or she commits murder. And I wanted you to just weigh in on that drive home and what your thoughts are about what that drive home might have been like if he actually killed those people.
Well, I can tell you, I had a case similar to this where it was a long period of time, 8 hours. This particular character made 3 trips in about 30 hours, 8-hour trips. So 24 hours worth of driving. And I can tell you that these guys that do this kind of thing, especially something like this that is fueled with this intimate relationship, it's the same kind of feel, the same kind of high that Tom Cruise gets when he launches off of a mountainside on a motorcycle. It is the adrenaline rush, the dopamine, everything that happens in a moment of thrill. That's what he's experiencing. And I would be surprised if he even remembers anything about the drive home, other than the fact that he left the location and he arrived at his residence. So that period of time, that's a long period of time to think about what you did. And I would imagine part of it is going to be justifying, hey, I was right. I did what I had to do to protect myself, whatever that self was that he was trying to take care of. So, yeah, it's a moment of reflection. I would imagine that he's looking up in that mirror at himself, and he's thinking, yeah, I did this thing, and he is further justifying everything that he did.
Police would have known about the Tepe murders an hour or so earlier than they did had the officer who was assigned to do the wellness check, the welfare check, simply gone to the right house. To their credit, the police acknowledged the mistake early on, but the body cam video shows just how off that officer was. He wasn't just at the wrong house number, he wasn't even on the right street. And he wasn't expecting to find anything amiss. Yeah, this house on the left here, this is 1417 on Summit Street. Doesn't look a thing like the Tepe house at 1411 North 4th. Number's wrong, street is wrong. The cop found no signs of trouble, obviously, because it was the wrong place, and he left. Which left Spencer and Mo Tepe's friends to check for themselves. And when they made their way inside the home, those friends discovered him dead in a pool of blood. They did not see his wife, Mo, and they were the ones who called 911. And this time the cops did manage to find the right house. So does that even matter? You bet it matters. By innocently poking around outside and inside the Tepe's home, trying to figure out what was wrong, those friends might have accidentally mucked up some critical evidence at the murder scene that police would have preserved had they roped off the house with crime scene tape much earlier. You know, evidence like the killer's footprints in the snow, maybe even inside the house, in the carpets. Look, murder cases have been won or lost on a lot less than that. And I can't wait to get to my next guest on this, because Matt Murphy's a former homicide prosecutor and author of The Book of Murder, A Prosecutor's Journey Through Love and Death. Matt, thanks so much for coming on. You know, the footprints outside the house, it bothers me so much because it was snowy in Columbus. And that would have been something that they could actually see, track, and then match to footwear if they could find it in, you know, Dr. McKee's home in Chicago.
Ideally, you're right. But you know what, Ashley, there's always mistakes made in cases like this. And every murder case is like a collage of evidence. It's the accumulated weight of everything that they have. And snow is tricky. In Southern California, as you can imagine, we don't get too many of those. I actually learned in a Bigfoot documentary, believe it or not, snow is tricky because when it freezes and melts in consecutive cycles, they tend to grow. And you can imagine what a defense lawyer could do with that. Blood is better. I have done those. I've done socked impressions where somebody's wearing socks and they step in blood. But remember, this is going to be an accumulation. So right now, there's some FBI agent, literally as we speak, pouring through this guy's computer records, cell phone records. They're looking at cell phone towers. Given the distance that he drove, he had to stop for gas, assuming, you know, he's presumed innocent, but assuming they got it right. So there's an avalanche of evidence coming that we have not heard yet. So, and of course, you're right.
I'm going to talk about that, Matt. In just a second, I'm going to talk to, like, in the next block, I'm literally going to run through all this digital and electronic evidence, but I'm still kind of stuck on the footprints, not maybe just outside, but also inside the house, because there could have been shoe impressions made inside the house as well, maybe on the carpet, maybe in blood, but it's compromised by the people who got there because the police didn't. So I was worried about that, but I'm also thinking about shoe treads. I have seen murder cases where a shoe tread is actually looked at for what's stuck inside the tread. Material from the crime scene. They might have had special gravel put on their back, you know, patio area that suddenly would show up in Chicago if that's the case. You know, are these the kinds of details that police are going after right now, like literally going down to the granular?
Oh, you bet they are. So any shoes that he's got are, I guarantee they're already in police custody. And they're going to be looked at by forensics. And what they're going to look for is what's called GSR, or gunshot residue. Another thing to remember is when somebody has a firearm, he's got quite a jawline, doesn't he, this guy? When somebody has a firearm, it's not like TV where it's just a gun. guns come along with gun boxes and cleaning equipment and ammunition. And what's really interesting, Ashley, is there is a system known as NIBIN, and that's the National Ballistics Database, where they take shell casings, assuming it's a semi-automatic handgun. We don't know that yet. But the shell casings that get expended on those, they're like DNA for firearms. And as DNA got all the glory, it's been like the rock star of forensic science. Very quietly, there's been huge forensic advancements in ballistic technology where they microscopically can match the grooves. We just had that in the Ashley Buzzard case in California. The tiny little microscopic grooves from the expended empty shell casing that gets ejected from the gun. And that is incredibly persuasive in front of a jury, having done those murder cases before. So this is, it's going to be an accumulation of evidence here, and I can't wait to see what they got.
So it's 11 days after the fact that they found the car, found him. So I am curious about gunshot residue, maybe even on the steering wheel or anything that might have been in the car that matches a weapon of any kind, or shell casings or shells or anything like that. But I'm also really interested in hairs and fibers and DNA. For instance, if it's Dr. McKee and he was in that house, he could have shed hairs, he could have shed fibers from clothes that they could find in the apartment in Chicago. He may have some transfer DNA, touch DNA, but he also might be bringing something back with him, meaning he could be bringing carpet fibers from the Tepe home back on those shoes or his lower pant legs or anything like that. And so I'm just always curious about how carefully the closet of the suspect is processed.
No, they're going to go through everything. And one of the things that nobody gets to see, Ashley, that I've been privileged to witness about 100 times at murder scenes, when you actually go, are the crime lab personnel and the forensic scientists at 3 o'clock in the morning who are doing their trade, they're practicing their craft, and watching them go to town is something to watch. They don't get enough credit, and they're often the most quiet people. They come in, they take the stand. Sorry, guys, oftentimes they're very nerdy and scientific. They are some of the hardest working and most critical people in all of law enforcement. And we know that from CSI, the TV shows and all that. But in real life, they really do make or break the case. So they're going through all the shoes. They're looking for clothes. What's interesting here, though, is we have an 11-day gap, and this guy was a vascular surgeon, right? So he's heard of DNA before, and he's got 11 days to clean things. But also, for the vast majority of murders, it is the killer's first rodeo. And if you think about anything you've done for the first time, and you think about all the mistakes, especially, this is what's known as a DV double. Actually, it's a domestic violence double homicide. Again, assuming they got the right guy. And these tend to be incredibly brutal, incredibly bloody. And look, they're going to get into this guy's cell phone records and emails, and most importantly, I think his Google searches are going to be very interesting. You know, the old adage is there's no machine that can read your mind. Yeah. But but we really
You've touched on two topics, Matt. You've touched on two topics I'm literally about to do in the next 2 blocks. I can't wait, though. I got to wrap it, but I can't wait to find out if when they called him, because I assume they'd call an ex-husband, if he gave an alibi that turned out to be wrong and a lie, because there's some rumor about that, and if he ever said the words, "I've never even been in that house," because that's just it's a chef's kiss for prosecutors if there's evidence of him in the house. Matt Murphy, thank you, as always. Appreciate it.
I love the show. Thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you, my friend. It stands to reason that a suspect's digital footprint is almost always bigger and more conclusive than his or her actual footprint, especially if they're left behind at a murder scene. And you would think that somebody working towards a doctorate in criminology would know that. Yes, Brian Koberger turned off his phone while killing 4 college students in their Moscow, Idaho home, but his phone pinged 23 different times at the murder scene in the weeks leading up to the killings. So what will phones and cameras and watches and GPS tell the police in Ohio about the murders now linked to an Illinois surgeon? My next guest has a pretty fair idea. Jennifer Coffendorfer is a retired FBI special agent, friend of the show, and has been doing a lot of research on this case. Last week, Jen, you joined me on the show, and you found that there was an inordinate spike in Google searches for the couple's home. And now, before the murders, and now you have found even more Google searches before the murders and after the murders. So what have you found that's new before the murders?
Right before the murders, Dr. Tepe, he was actually Google searched as well in an inordinate amount of time. In other words, everyone's flatlined, and then all of a sudden he spikes in November 30th. So that tells me that somebody was really looking into what he was doing.
What about the after murder searches? What did you find has spiked after the murders?
So after the murders and immediately after the murders, Michael McKee spiked. Now, that makes some sense, right? People thought that that could be him, but it continued to spike throughout. And when we look at Brian Kohberger, it's just such a mirror image of his spike pattern. Of course, that was in a time frame 5 weeks before anyone ever knew his name. I just found it very interesting. Was Michael McKee worried that people were looking at him, and so he was checking social media and so on?
Because it wasn't you and me. None of us actually had any idea that Mo Tepe had been married, you know, a decade prior. And so we weren't Googling the name Dr. Michael McKee. Nobody in the true crime community really was doing that. So that is a fascinating find. Let me ask you this. The cops have put out the exact time that Mo and Spencer Tepe were murdered, and it's 3:52 a.m. How would they know the exact minute?
Well, I think that that's going to be based on the visual evidence from videotape that they have going in and coming out. So I think that's how they have the precise time. It could also be from his cell phone. Now, this is what I find interesting, though, is they would have geofenced this property right away. And I don't understand why they wouldn't have had his name prior to that, unless, Ashley, he had a burner phone. And if he did, that makes sense to me that they have a precise time.
Here's what I'm thinking. It could be also a fitness tracker on any of the three of them, because the spike in the blood pressure and the heart rate at the time of the killings for all of them would have been through the roof. And so if any of them was wearing an Oura ring or an Apple Watch or anything like that, that could have shown. Or maybe there's just video somewhere that registered gunshots or sounds of gunshots. I have to leave it there because there's just so much information. Will you come back this week, Jen?
Yeah, absolutely, Ashley. Thanks for having me.
Sure, appreciate it. All right.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.